Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Skwawk Talk on Socialist Telly. I'm just bringing Damo in, who's been having a couple of technical issues, but he's with us again.
Oh, aren't I just?
And yes, thank you for joining us. We have a bumper program coming along for you, I think, in terms of issues to discuss. So I think we'll be doing well if we get everything done within the hour. But let's go for it and aim for that. How are you both, guys?
It's a busy old time, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah, busy with all sorts, but yes, not a lot to get excited about, sadly. Lots to get angry about, though. Speaking of which, I mean, let's jump right in. I mean, our first issue on the agenda for tonight is Claudia Webbe's situation. So I will say at the outset that her appeal process has begins this week. So we're not going to talk about the case relating to that in any way, but you would be forgiven as a viewer and as a reader of news for not knowing that a British man was arrested this week in Ireland, 41-year-old fella, on suspicion and charged on suspicion of planning to kill Claudia Webbe. The media in this country has pretty much entirely ignored that. Where they've reported it all on the arrest, they've omitted the name of the MP involved. And my personal view is that that's because, it would be very easy to point back at their coverage of the Claudia Webbe case, that's just finished the other week, and link, the lurid and frankly not very accurate coverage of that case with the whipping up of, incitement of hatred against Claudia that has led to this situation. And at the same time, we've seen, that Andy McDonald, the white male MP, has received police protection after a threat against him, and solidarity with Andy. I hope everything's all right with him. However, that is a very different response from the establishment to its reaction to Claudia, as I understand it. So, Bonnie, do you want to come in first on that one?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Black woman dragged through court. We won't talk about the court case in itself because there's an appeal pending. But it's the second Black Labour female MP that has had issues. That has been, I mean, the other one being Apsana Begum, of course. Where is the protection for these women? Why are women not getting the same amount of protection as men? And I do notice as well that other white women Labour MPs, I'm not seeing them stand up in solidarity with their sisters. Why aren't they making a fuss and demanding these women are protected, particularly since both of the female Labour MPs, and I'll call Claudia a Labour MP because she's Labour, whether she's in the party or not. Why aren't they getting protection, and why aren't they getting coverage? Why are they being thrown to the wolves? And why is it open season on women? Why is domestic abuse being disregarded or ignored? And when are we going to start getting some truth out there? I'm really sick of it, quite frankly.
Yeah. Apologies, people looking at me looking slightly diminished. My camera zoom is playing up like the clappers. I can't get it fixed. I'll fight with it another day. Claudia, yes, it's absolutely appalling. There's been no news coverage apart from Steve's excellent coverage, actually, on this death threat that she's received. They can cover Jess Phillips in the Mirror talking about her family knowing what to do if she should be killed. But not on anything to do with Claudia, who has actually had a threat. Last month, the Tory Graph ran a story regarding a death threat against Angela Rayner, I recall. And obviously, Andy McDonald, we mentioned, and that got coverage in The Independent, getting police protection after an incident involving somebody travelling to meet him and meaning him harm. Now, Andy is a lefty. Angela does whatever's best for Angela, frankly, and Jess couldn't turn left if her book deals depended on it. So sadly, the omission from the mainstream media repeatedly, multiple publications regarding the arrest of, as Steve has said, a 41-year-old man in County Cork and 15 Irish Gardaí raiding a property there for evidence is really, really bad. It's appalling optics. But looking at the lack of coverage, one can only surmise, given that, as I said, Andy is a lefty, that racism has played a part, because Claudia is black, everybody else I've mentioned is white. A black woman receiving death threats apparently is not newsworthy, even when they are an MP, even with the death of David Amos still so fresh in our minds, frankly. That Claudia happens to be a lefty as well, I dare say, could only have added to that, but absolute solidarity to Claudia here. Shame on the so-called mainstream media, and fantastic journalism once again from yourself, Steve.
I think something that we mustn't get away from, though, as well, is the fact that domestic abuse is seriously underreported. Women are very much exposed, especially those that are prepared to put themselves forward into public life. For a woman that has escaped domestic abuse, and this feeds into the data leak and everything else as well, for a woman to be brave enough to put herself forward in a public facing role, having experienced abuse and been terrorized and all of these things. I mean, as I say, I'm not specifically talking about Claudia, I'm talking about any woman in public life who has experienced domestic abuse. They need additional assurances to know that they and their family are going to be safe. And I'm really sick of the underplaying of domestic abuse, because it is a growing problem. And until women are treated with respect, particularly in public life, we are not going to end this problem. We're not going to end the scourge. We're not going to end the generations of kids who are growing up in a volatile household. We're not going to assure women that actually they don't have to put up with this. There is a way out of it, because my views on what went on with Apsana, and she's spoken very honestly and bravely about it all, is that stuff never leaves you. It never goes. And it is not taken seriously. For example, women who have fled domestic abuse, if they want to run for a position in the Labour Party, they've got to be on the electoral register, which a lot of women who have fled domestic abuse are anxious about. They sort of give up their right to vote because they don't want to be tracked down by a person that they've escaped. They're very cautious about what goes on and what name. And I saw some very worrying things about women members who've had their very personal data, their genuine data leaked, and they're now worried about their personal safety too. This is an issue of racism. This is an issue of institutional sexism. And this is a situation in a society where it's seemingly okay to attack women. And it's got to stop. We've got to say that this cannot go on.
Yes. I mean, we'll talk as well a little bit, I think, about how, well, I mean, let's first off say, well done to the Irish police for getting hold of this guy, and presumably that'll go through the courts and come out with the right decision. But the Labour Party's response on that, and on the whole kind of case with Claudia, frankly, has been absolutely appalling. I mean, they couldn't wait to cut her loose the very second that the original magistrate's verdict came in. And let's remind people it wasn't a jury trial or anything like that. And let's also remind people that, as far as can be ascertained from any of the records, none of the stuff that headlines every time they cover this, and I said we weren't going to go there, but we'll just touch on that. You don't get a 10-week suspended sentence if the judge or magistrate thinks that you've threatened to throw acid on somebody. The words about threatening to throw acid on anybody never came out in the trial at all. So but that still gets repeated routinely. And I can't imagine any reasonable person would question that. That must have played a part in the way that people have felt liberated. The people with racist instincts have felt liberated, and misogynist ones felt liberated to just spew those out, which is what's been happening, because her supporters put together a dossier of some of the abuse towards her, which is on the Skwawk Talk page if you want to have a look in a video form, so you can see some of this stuff kind of rolling through that she's had to put up with. And Labour immediately said, how shocking, not a fit person, she's been expelled. No kind of regard for the fact there's an appeal process going on. As far as I'm aware, there's never been any kind of a welfare call to give her any kind of support even before the verdict came in, which innocent until proven guilty and all this sort of stuff. And and looking to try and get her out now and saying she should resign a seat and let them choose it. No doubt some right winger. I mean, they let Keith Vaz sit in that seat for donkey's years when he was getting up to all the stuff that's come out in the media over the years. And Claudia's had what seems to amount to a domestic, and and that has domestic row essentially, and that has come to them behaving in this way. But they've given her, there's been no calls for any protection for her. We've mentioned Apsana Begum's case. Now, she was found not guilty, but they actually had people at the courtroom waiting to go in front of the camera the instant the guilty verdict they expected came in, to start talking about who they were going to replace her with. And by the reports of people who were there, these Labour staff went away very disgruntled and very disappointed that the verdict not guilty had been rendered. I mean,
the thing that really
we've seen the thing
me
where
about
I'll just finish with this. We've seen the thing where Angela Rayner, withdrew, and I think it was ill-advised, but she withdrew and apologised for her comment about Tories being scum. But as Alexi Sale says, he'll take a Tory over the Labour right anytime, because at least they're honest about being who they are. Whereas the Labour right poses as one thing, and as he thinks some of the worst people in the world. Sorry, Bonnie, go on. And
that's fine. I was just going to say the thing that really bothers me about Apsana's case is the person who brought the vexatious claim against her has faced no consequences from the party. And we seem to be seeing this time and again. Women in the party are assumed to be guilty before being tried. And male protagonists, and the ones causing problems, harassing women, seem to be getting very, very little punishment or very little in the way of a reprimand. I would like to see an investigation. I mean, we need to see the Ford report for a start, because I think a lot of truths will be laid bare when that finally comes out. But I'd also like to see some sort of analysis of what's going on in GLUE, in the governance and legal unit, with regards to the way that women are reporting issues and whether or not they're getting dealt with in anything like a timely manner, because this can literally be a matter of life or death for women. And it certainly has massive impacts on women's mental health and sense of safety. And actually, the party's got a duty of care to their members and to people that are doing things on a voluntary basis or putting themselves forward for public roles. And they need to start taking that very seriously, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with Apsana, I mean, as you said, Steve, the people there were waiting outside, literally anticipating her being found guilty of it. Of course, that wasn't the end of the story for her either. She's continued to have issues with vexatious claims being made against her. She's continued to be bullied. She's continued to have harassment still to deal with. And there's been very little sign of any support that I've observed that she will have received. And I completely expect that if that verdict had gone against Apsana, she would have been treated exactly as Claudia is being treated now. Claudia has an appeal going in. Obviously, we're not going to discuss that because that's yet to come, and nobody here wants to say anything that's going to be taken in any way as prejudicial. But at the end of the day, she's entitled to have that and have her case heard, and for the party to expel her before that's even taken place, she just shows the sheer lack of support, the lack of. It's just so obviously factional what is going on there, and I really do feel for her. She just doesn't and Apsana, it doesn't feel like either of them have had their fair hearing. They've had their prejudices put up against them ahead of having their day in court, shall we say.
And I think it's important to reiterate as well there, Dame, I completely agree with you, but I think it's really important to say that in Claudia's court case, there has been no jury. There has been no people sitting on judgment, just a judge. This is one person's decision and perception of what's gone on in this case. This is not a legal case. This is completely different and not being dealt with in a way that people might assume without reading into the story as well.
And the magistrate, let's not forget, who's on the record of sparing a neo-Nazi who was researching how to make bombs, got spared jail because the young man's teachers said he'd probably get good A-level results if he didn't go to prison. So that was convincing for the judge.
Remind me, does he come from the right sort of family, Steve?
I honestly don't know. I just I'm not sure. Ian Wiltshire asked, does anyone have a link for the True Web story? Please. Now, again, this is just analysis of what, the difference between how it's presented in the press and what actually was presented in the court, and a look at, what went on the record in the court and what the prosecution was actually able to produce in terms of evidence compared to what the media have been saying about it. So, this is, I wouldn't go as far as to, say definitively the true story, but it's a look at the difference between the two. So that's running there for a couple of minutes on the back in case anybody wants to find it. So yeah, I mean, that's the party is just run by awful people at the moment. I mean, that's the long and the short of it, and it's almost kind of too depressing to go there, really. But we're going to go there some more. Labour data breach. What's the latest on that? What have you heard? What's the what's your analysis of what the party's been getting up to there?
Well, there was an interesting. I'm just looking down through my notes actually because I did a video about this earlier on. There was a document out by Jewish Voice for Labour today. They found time to apparently the code of conduct of confidentiality and privacy for the party has been updated, but they're not actually sure when the NEC actually heard this, when they made these changes. Apparently they're not in the interests of members. They're essentially dictating that members should shut up when they're told to. They are not to discuss matters online if they've been told to be quiet, and they now face a risk of disciplinary or legal proceedings if they don't. So it did make me wonder, what on earth do you get for your membership dues these days if you've now got to shut up and be quiet and not be heard, or be threatened with a day in court yourself by the party? Have they got that hard up now for funding that they're willing to take members to court in order to wring a little bit more cash out of them? It's horrible. It really is absolutely horrible. But of course, we still don't know who this third-party company is that's had our confidential data. I say our because it doesn't matter whether you're a current member or a past member. It seems your data's been retained, in some cases going back several years, and this company have had it for what reason we do not know, and they've been the victim of what appears to be a ransomware attack where the data got where their access to the data was blocked until they paid up, and then they released it. But obviously,
yes, I mean, getting struck by lightning once is bad luck. Getting struck twice, you start to wonder what's going on, because there was a case last year that it took place, they said, between February and May, and it eventually got announced. Well, it was announced by August, according to the Wayback Machine's records of when the page first appeared. And Labour had to admit that had been done. Said that there was no sensitive information had been leaked. Said that the people disputed that because people said their credit card numbers had started being misused and various stuff. But this company had suffered this ransomware attack, and the Labour Party eventually admitted it. There's no indication at the moment that it's the same company. It might be, it might not. We don't know. But for Labour to twice give data contracts to firms or a firm that has suffered a ransomware attack, which let's be extremely clear what that is. Ransomware is, people's data in the hands of criminals, and that is a big deal, regardless what But I'm gonna read you out what the party is now telling people, in basically saying, don't make too big a fuss about it, because we don't think it's that sensitive, essentially. So this is what they're sending out to people. There's a shorter version going out without some of this data that some people are getting, but this is the long version. Hello, thank you for emailing the Labour Party in relation to the recent cyber incident. Labour is continuing to urgently investigate with the third party who was subject to the cyber incident, so we're still not told who it is. Our continued understanding of this situation is that the information impacted was what was given to the party when you joined as a member or supporter, or if you have contacted Labour in the past. It looks like I'm going slightly out of sync, but I'll plough on. So if you've ever written an email to the Labour Party, you're probably affected. Now, where that gets, I'll continue with their email in a minute, but where that gets really worrying is if you are putting in a subject access request, as tens of thousands, probably more, left members did to find out what was being said about them because the party was busy smearing everybody left, right and centre to try to kick them out. The first thing that you have to provide to the party when you put that in is photo ID. Copy of your driving license, copy of your passport, whatever. So you put that in on an email to the party. It would appear from what the party's saying here that that means that that information has got into the hands of crooks, and they've got a copy of your driving license or of your passport, and are holding it to ransom with the party. No guarantees that they delete it then. The one last year, they said they'd received assurances from the criminals that they deleted the information. They're criminals, you know. If you could trust their word, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. So let's plow on. So the Labour Party takes the security of all personal information for which it is responsible very seriously. Please be assured that we are, and it doesn't say taking all necessary action, it says we are working to take all necessary actions to keep your data safe. At this time, we are not able to provide any further information to you beyond that contained within the notification about the incident. This is based on the advice we received from law enforcement authorities we continue to coordinate with. I highly doubt that the police have said you can't tell anybody which firm it is.
Well, that's the baffling thing, isn't it? They're telling anyone who's ever had any contact with the Labour Party, it would seem, that their information, their private data is out somewhere, probably online or what have you. So they're not protecting our data, but they're protecting the identity of the organisation that's responsible for the data to have vanished and been published in such a way. It's a slightly skewed.
But listen, it gets better still. This is quite an epistle, this one they've written. At this time, we've done that one. Please be assured we will provide you with further updates as soon as we are able via our website. So they're not saying we're going to email you anymore. We're going to put it on our website, and it's up to you to go and look at labour.org.uk about/your-data. The Labour Party retains a minimal amount of information on an indefinite basis for members, affiliated and registered supporters, and former members and supporters. This is to administer our internal governance as well as to apply our membership rules. Now, the GDPR laws say that if somebody asks you to delete their information, you must erase their information. There's nothing in there about keeping a minimal amount for an indefinite period. You're not supposed to have it beyond what you absolutely must have it for. And if somebody asks you to delete it, you have to delete it. We also retain your name and address from the electoral register as we have a legitimate interest in continuing to process this data. This also helps to facilitate the fundamental role political parties play in engaging with voters as part of the democratic process. We do, however, minimise the personal data that we hold and ensure that unnecessary information is deleted once it is no longer required. Get this, where someone is no longer a member or supporter, we restrict the processing of this information, not delete the information, we restrict the processing of this information in such a way to ensure that the Labour Party does not contact you again, except they have, because they've got everybody on file to write to you about all this. So the law says you've got to delete people's information if they ask you to. You're only allowed to hold it with their express permission. But they're now saying, and let's remember that there have been examples come out in the past week of people saying, I've got 2 emails here from Labour because didn't trust them the first time, where I've said, are you sure you have erased all my data? And they've said, we have erased all your data. And that was a lie because they haven't. And they're now admitting that they haven't. So there's all sorts coming out of the woodwork with this. Please note that the above actions will not stop the following being sent to you in your household. And then they go on about like election communications and stuff, which is a lot of diversionary bollocks that's got nothing to do with with the case in hand, because that's stuff that just goes on as part of an election. So the party's been, is now admitting that every time it's told anybody that they deleted all their information according to the law, they were lying about that. And they've been holding it indefinitely because it suited their purposes. And now they've changed their policy to say, we're allowed to talk about all this stuff and you guys are not. So, give me your thoughts on that, Bucky, please.
It's a good one.
I think from the first email that I received from the party about this, I think my heckles were up from the very opening of that email, which was addressed, "Dear colleague." And it seems to me we maybe need to remind people at the top of our party that we're not colleagues. Actually, the General Secretary and the leader of the party work for us. Certainly the General Secretary's salary is paid by us members. He is not a colleague of us. He's supposed to be working for us. And actually, we're seeing an awful lot of repression and oppression. We're not allowed to talk about actual personal harm done to us by the inadequacies of the party with regards to this data leak, or by their complicity in failing to delete data and information. So actually, we should be treated with a bit more respect. We're disregarded. We're told that we can talk about this in a meeting. We can't talk about that in a meeting. Where is the political debate happening? Where are we able to make our voices heard in what's happening with our party we're supposed to be a part of it? Yeah. And yet we're just seen as subs fodder, or people that can chuck money at this project, and that's not really what we're doing it for.
No, it's getting to the point where more and more of what we expect to be able to do as part of a labour movement is becoming outlawed under pain of prosecution. Even as I said a minute ago, what are you getting for your dues from this party anymore? Evans is an employee, but he behaves like a dictator. He acts like the Labour Party is his own personal fiefdom, and it's not. The working to take all action line you read out a minute ago, Steve. That was fascinating. Really, it could be anything. It could mean anything from paying the blasted ransomware attackers to just getting on hands and knees, going, please let it go with sugar on top. Please. I mean, it literally could be anything. I mean, they can have passport information, as you said, driving license. They've been trawling through the electoral rolls and gathering data. That's your name and address that they've got. If you've ever contacted them by phone or email, that's your phone number or your email address they've got that they could have potentially lost. And of course, that's before we get to the whole governance and legal business, where we believe that they've been trawling social media, gathering information on people in order to make these blasted notices of investigation, purge people. How much of that are they sitting on? How much of that information could be taken by these people and used against them? Because we don't know who this third party is, and we don't know what information they've been given access to. And
well, you put your date of birth on record as well with the party when you join, don't you? Because they want to know, are you a young member, are you a retirement, etc. So if they've got your date of birth, your ID, your phone number, your email address, credit card numbers, I don't know from donations, but there's all kinds of fraud that could happen from that. I'm just going to field one quick question here. Paul was asking, just a question: if Labour wants to discipline me, do they hold a contract I've signed saying they can do it to me retrospectively? Well, as far as I'm aware, no, they can't do anything to you if you've left the party. You're outside of their jurisdiction now. Who knows? But I would put money on the fact that any left winger who's left will find themselves getting blackballed if they try to rejoin any time while the current faction, not just the current regime, but the current faction are in control of the party, because they have no qualms about or scruples about blacklisting and blackballing people, even though it's an obvious affront to democracy. And same Paul is asking, is it true that the company David Evans transferred it to his wife are found responsible for the leak? They are personally liable. Well, I'll have to say first off, there is no information to suggest that that company is responsible for the leak. They've denied that it's them. As far as we can tell, it isn't. However, the law is that David Evans, Keir Starmer, and potentially members of the National Executive Committee in the party, if there is a fine or some other kind of legal consequential lawsuit or whatever that results in a cash demand that the party is unable to pay, those people from the top down can be held personally liable to pay the debt. And as I understand it, on what's called a joint and several liability. In other words, it's not, there's 30, 40 members on the NEC, few people in the management and the leadership structure. So we divide it by 50 and everybody pays a 50th. It's any one of those people can be pursued for the whole amount, and and be taken to court for it if they decline to pay up. So they'll go after whoever's the most likely to pay, or to be able to pay, essentially.
Figures involved,
yeah. So whoever's responsible for the leak and whichever company has leaked it, that's irrelevant to the liability issue. If Labour is judged by the ICO to be guilty and gets fined, or or loses a lawsuit brought by people whose information's ended up in the hands of criminals, etc.
Can I just say that there's a slightly more worrying aspect to all of this than identity fraud and identity theft, is that this is our personal political data. It will show if we're members or affiliates of trade unions. All of that information being out there, you may not necessarily want your employer to know that you're a member of the Labour Party. If you're a civil servant, you're going to have a real problem if your work finds out that you've joined a political party, for example. But this is our political leanings that are being exposed here beyond what people decide to put out through their own social media. It's being taken without our consent. And it is quite worrying from the perspective of people knowing what trade unions every member belongs to or is affiliated with. And I'm actually wondering if the trade unions might be interested in launching some sort of official inquiry or review, or make some demands on behalf of their members who are affiliated to the Labour Party. I actually think there's possibly a very big case there for the unions to reassert actually that the Labour Party is there to serve working people, serve ordinary people, and they are their members. And their data, the affiliated members' data, has been abused and lost in this way as well. It's quite worrying. It's going to affect people. It could potentially, I won't say it definitely will, but it could potentially affect people's job prospects, their income, their careers, the jobs that they hold could be put at risk. All this information, because this is political data, it's highly sensitive potentially.
Yeah, it is a massive I'm trying to think of a word that doesn't involve a swear word in terms of how this has been done by the party. But this is, that it is a
only shambles.
Yeah, cluster or whatever, or a S show, etc. So I'm trying to be good. Demo, were you coming in there?
Not in anything particularly. It's just a great big mess, as you absolutely quite rightly said. It's just the latest in a string of disasters for this hopeless Labour leadership. You just wonder what they're going to do to up their game next. I'm sure Starmer was planning a 7th or 8th relaunch by now, but you might as well not bother with this one. You might as well skip straight ahead to 9th and 10th, because you'll need to. But
one thing, if they put that on the bright side, if they put the data on his latest relaunch in the database that's been nicked, then at least more people will know about it than would normally happen. So, okay, let's move on to another kind of tangentially Labour-related issue. With Jeremy Corbyn was supposed to speak at the climate change rally on Saturday and then didn't, and insiders around that issue have said that that came about as a result of Sadiq Khan's office applying pressure to prevent the organisers from allowing Jeremy to speak, and that in some way the insurance of the event was the mechanism for that. Some good work subsequently by Aaron Bastani, who said that the pressure seems to have been applied on a particular charity that was underwriting the whole event. There may have been a threat to withdraw police permission for it, etc., which would have scuppered the insurance. In some way, though, it seems that they were lent on in order to pull this back. Now, I will say the Mayor's office didn't respond immediately, but they have now responded to deny that they had any involvement with that. People on the other side are still insisting that that was a cynical action in order to deprive Jeremy Corbyn of a voice, particularly worried about the fact that his popularity still outshines that of Keir Starmer and probably Sadiq Khan as well. And they're trying. They've no doubt got an eye on the fact that if there's a general election next year, they're going to be trying to unseat him, because I don't think there's any chance they're going to let him back in the party, and they don't want people to see how popular he is. That's as far as I can see. That if these allegations are correct, then that would be the most likely motivation. But it's climate change. I mean, who the hell puts the short-term political small-minded crap ahead of the fact that we need a planet to live on?
Small-minded Blairites, as always.
Well, yeah, the Labour right, we know that now, yeah. So
he's a fantastic orator. He really does rally crowds. People buzz when he's been speaking. They come away enthused and inspired. And very, very few politicians are capable of doing that. Starmer sure as hell isn't. Khan has never really floated my boat either. I'm sure Bonnie's got more to say on Khan than we do. She's likely more familiar with him being in his neck of the woods. But it's just petulance. It's pure petulance, plain and simple. I know that if Jeremy's going to go for to stand as an independent, and there's a large part of me that hopes he does, I don't believe he'll be let back into the party, as much as people might want him to, and as much as he should be. I don't believe it'll happen. If he stands, I for one will be getting on a train and campaigning out for him. I hope a lot of other people would as well, to teach that stinking Labour Party a lesson if they dare go there. But
you'd have thought they'd learnt their lesson from Ken Livingstone, wouldn't you?
But I mean, it's climate change, for heaven's sake. We've had the big COP26 event going on up in Scotland. You've got this coming down here in London, and it's just, oh no, but it's Corbyn. We've got to put the boot in first. We've got to stop him from speaking. We've got to undermine him. We can't let people hear him. Well, I'm sorry, but we've listened to him for years. We haven't forgotten. We've got the guy's back, going forwards for forever and a day, because we know he's the real deal, whether he's in a position of power anymore or not. But
well, I think you've hit the nail on the head with those words there, Demo, because I mean, it's maybe slightly controversial, but I mean, I don't think Jeremy is, he's not a kind of a Nye Bevan. He's not Michael Sheen or somebody who can kind of, orate in this, moving way, whatever he's talking about. But the fact of the matter is, when he gets up and talks, people know that they're hearing the real him. They know that he is the real deal, that they are getting the authentic person in front of them, saying what he believes and saying what he believes in. And, and that's very rare among most, a lot of politicians. It's not common that people think, I can trust every word that this person is saying. And, if they then hear, Keir Starmer, and you just kind of feel as though there's he must live with a focus group inserted up his nether regions or something to kind of feed him his latest versions of his lines, his WTFs and all this kind of stuff. And it must be, if you're a Labour right winger and that's the best you've got, it must be embarrassing.
You're in trouble. I mean, who would believe? I mean, given how many pledges, how many promises, how many times he's hypocritized himself, if that's a word. Who would believe anything he said? Even if he did come out with, transformative policies, I'm gonna, renationalize this. I'll change my mind. I'm gonna do that. Who would believe him now anyway? I wouldn't trust a word that comes out of that man's mouth.
And the latest one, we weren't in talks about me working for a law firm. We were in discussions.
Oh, that's the latest one, isn't it?
I mean, the thing is to deny Jeremy a voice on a platform when we're talking about the environment is absolutely ludicrous. As you say, Steve, he is utterly authentic. And he's one of those MPs who have been making the case for the environment before it was, trendy, before lots of people were aware of it and so on, even when it actually sometimes worked against him because he had a love for his allotment and doing things the environmentally sustainable way. And in fact, in his 2 leadership campaigns, when he was traveling around the country doing those massive rallies, how did he get around? He wasn't driven. He wasn't in a car. He was on the train with ordinary people. And it's difficult because I was on those trains too. And as difficult as sometimes it was to make sure that he got from the train station to the venue where the rally was happening, he would still find time to stop and talk to anybody who wanted to talk to him. And that, I think, is what certain people are really afraid of. He's got a real connection. Jeremy's got a real connection with people. And when he speaks about something, as you say, it is 100% genuine. And actually, he's one of those politicians that you can look back at anything they've said at any point in their career and know that they were absolutely bang on the money, absolutely spot on. Everything they said would happen has come to pass. And so to deny him a place on a platform such as the environment is crass beyond belief. They're doing themselves harm. They think that they're silencing him, but actually they're showing themselves up as pretty petty and small-minded. And you know, regardless of what happened in more recent years, the last time they did that to a London politician, it bit them on the behind, because that London politician ended up running as an independent candidate for Mayor of London rather than the Labour candidate for the Mayor of London. And do you know what? People voted for him. The Labour candidate didn't win. And they really need to learn some lessons from history. People see what's authentic. People know actually what we need and what things need to be put right. And to try and silence somebody who's actually got that many people behind them is really foolhardy. They need to learn what battles to take on, what fights to pick. And that they've picked the wrong one there.
Yes. There's a few opposite comments coming in there. I mean, so one can't refind it now, but somebody said that they would, you know, travel from Nottinghamshire to go and see. Here we go. My wife and I travelled from Wales to Nottingham a few weeks ago to go and see Corbyn. If Starmer was knocking at my front door, I wouldn't get up to open it. So, but you know, we saw when they started making noises about they were going to, you know, challenge Corbyn in North Islington at the next general election, etc., which I have no doubt that they'll try. And Lisa Nandy, I think it was, said, you know, I'd go there and campaign for him, and lots of people went, well, we'll travel from one end of the country to the other to go and campaign for Jeremy, but we'll also travel from, you know, the other end of the country back up to go and campaign against you in Wigan. And that's, you know, that's their problem, and they haven't got anything to inspire people and excite people like that. The next general election, you know, if he got allowed in by the establishment because they think, well, we'll give him a turn now. We've had enough of Boris Johnson, and we can finish off the left by letting Starmer sneak in the back door. That's a possibility. But failing that, it's going to be an absolute embarrassment, because, you know, who the hell is going to go and knock on the front door and say, you know, we're really excited about presenting you with the opportunity to vote for Keir Starmer? You know, it's like getting excited about blancmange, but you know, blancmange has gone off because it doesn't do what it says on the tin, and it's going to make you ill if you eat it. So, you know, I think it's going to be an interesting time. If Johnson does gamble and call another election, it's going to be a very interesting time.
Do you know, while they're attacking or trying to silence Jeremy, we've lost 160,000 lives potentially needlessly. We've lost billions of pounds to contracts given to mates of people on the front bench. We've got a cash for peerages scandal again. I mean, this seems to be a regulatory thing. Why are they not attacking those people who are causing the deaths and the avoidable suffering of so many ordinary people right across the country? Why are they silencing someone who's a voice for good? Let's start calling out the cheats, the greedy people who are taking hundreds of thousands of pounds in addition to their regular salary from a company, who obviously see a financial benefit from having influence and power over people in Parliament. Let's start dealing with those, and actually let the general public decide who they want to support, who they want to hear from. Because I bet you any money, if at that rally there was one stage with Jeremy on and another stage with actually anyone else who's on the shadow front bench, I wonder who people would be wanting to listen to.
Yes.
Yeah, well, you're talking about somebody who represents transformative policies, and Starmer doesn't want to represent anything of the sort. He wants continuity. He wants his turn, essentially. And if you look at that poll that came out the other day, Labour finally took a poll lead, but they didn't actually move in the polls. The Tories lost 4. I think the Greens gained 5. So they were the complete beneficiaries of the Tory loss. Labour leapfrogged them slightly, or rather they fell 1 point behind Labour, purely because finally the Tories are starting to, the shine is coming off the Tories a bit with everything that's happening. It's nothing to do with Starmer at all himself. And of course, at the time that poll was conducted, Starmer was once again isolating, so he wasn't around. And now he's back again. Expect things to return to normal. But that's how it's playing. I think that's his game plan. He wants to win by default, not because he actually offers anything. He's just.
Well, this is an interesting comment in here from Jacob Rario here. Have you seen the story about Corbyn blocking Starmer's second job in 2017 on Labour Hub? So this is, Keir Starmer was interviewed yesterday on the telly about his discussion. Well, he wasn't having talks; he was having discussions with a law firm about going to work for them. He's still been getting paid quite substantial amounts of money for quite a long time after that, from this firm and other firms for lawyer work he's done for them outside of Parliament. So he hasn't only been being an MP. But yeah, apparently this job that was going to be was offered to him as some kind of highly paid consultant with the law firm, one that's represented people against the Labour Party on quite a lot of occasions, as I remember. And Jeremy blocked it. Well done, Jeremy Corbyn had his principles and stuck by it, and Starmer wasn't allowed to take the job. I only wish he'd gone a bit further and sacked him back then, and then we might have not had so much damage done at the 2018 conference. What's next? Bonnie, do you want to tell us about rail cuts?
Yeah, so as part of the rail reforms, the government have basically said that because of the amount of support that the industry has had to receive during COVID to keep the country moving, to keep the key workers moving, those key workers that are not worth £15 an hour, those people, and the rest of us, because they've had to subsidise, let's not forget the private companies, the train operating companies that were running those trains. They're using that as cover for enormous cuts to the railway. Now, let's take the railway in Scotland, for example. ScotRail, which is one of the franchises in Scotland, are in consultation about a potential cut of 300 services per day across Scotland. And the services there go to quite a lot of quite distant, quite isolated places as well. But it's essential to keep people moving. To cut 300 services a day in Scotland would be absolutely devastating. The railway in Scotland is worth something like 1.3 million pounds to the Scottish economy. It brings back much more than it costs. And to talk about it being a false economy is unbelievable. And this week, there is obviously quite a lot of focus on what's going on in Glasgow because of COP26. And if we're going to be serious about reducing people's carbon footprints, we need to get people out of their cars by providing them a viable alternative. And at the moment, it's so expensive to travel around the country on trains. We've got sort of one of the highest fares in the world, actually, per passenger mile. It's very expensive. If I wanted to come and visit you, Steve, it would cost me probably twice as much to get there and back on a train as it would for me to get a flight to Scotland, for instance. And with the latest budget, we saw taxes increased on long-haul flights, which are the only flights really that I would say are actually necessary, but there are still no taxes on internal flights, which I can't understand why we're having this. We've got problems with traffic on our roads. We've got problems with lorry drivers. We've got problems with pollution. It would seem to me that if we actually wanted to prove to the world that we're serious about ending climate change, we would be investing more in our railways, not cutting severe amounts of money from the budgets. And one of the ways that they're looking at doing it is they're offering voluntary severance to staff working in Network Rail and in the train operating companies. But some serious questions have to be asked that if those jobs go, who keeps the railway safe? Who keeps people travelling? How do we know that disabled people, that people with children, that any other kind of person is going to feel comfortable or safe travelling on the railway? I think there was a report came out today in a policing journal about the number of women that are being assaulted So I'm talking about women again, but the number of women that are being assaulted on public transport, and obviously there are, going alongside these cuts, there are likely to be cuts to British Transport Police as well. So again, with the British Transport Police being cut because they are funded from the train operating companies and from Network Rail's money. We're bringing these train operating companies back in-house, but it's not proper renationalisation, it would seem. The William Shapps report, sorry, this is quite sort of specialist, but the William Shapps report doesn't actually explain the mechanism for things happening. ScotRail is reverting to Transport for Scotland. So it will be government controlled, but it's still not nationalised in the way that British Rail used to be. They can call it Great British Rail as much as they like. It's still not going to be a nationalised railway. But if they were to, as with every other public service, if they were to cut out those that are making money from these services, then there'd be a lot more to spend on making sure they worked properly. And if we were tackling climate change, we wouldn't have seen Stonehaven happen. We wouldn't have seen any number of rail disasters down your neck of the woods, Damien. Whole railway lines were washed away in storms. And this is because of climate change. Sorry?
If they will build them on the beach.
But it's a lovely ride. It really is. It's a lovely ride. But yes, so all of these things are going on, and tomorrow actually at COP26 is Transport Day. So there's a lot of campaigning and work going on there. All 4 transport unions in Scotland have worked together to make a report to demonstrate that we need to protect our railways. It keeps the country moving. It was absolutely vital throughout the pandemic. It remains as vital. And obviously a lot of the money that went to keep it working have gone to private companies' pockets. Perhaps we should get some of that money back.
Yeah, our wonderful nationalised rail service, except that the UK is the only nation that isn't allowed to own any of it. So much of it is owned by the Dutch, the Germans, the French, and our railway fees are so expensive because we're subsidising their rail travel.
Absolutely.
People should be really angry about that. Do you want to pay an exorbitant price for your ticket so that some French family can have a cheaper one? Because that's essentially a lot of the problem. It's not right. And of course, you mentioned COP26, so you'd be remiss to not mention the fact that in the budget, Rishi Sunak cut the costs of flying around the country, when really you would think that cutting the costs of traveling by rail, which is infinitely cleaner, would be a better way of doing it. But apparently not. I can't imagine why.
Well, rail is the most environmentally sustainable form of public transport that exists. And also, in the days before the big super trucks that are sort of 2 stories high and hundreds of meters long, shipping all of our stuff around on the roads, backing up all of the motorways, stuff used to get moved on the railway. And there is actually no reason that we shouldn't actually get goods back on the railway, because then we're not burning diesel. Then we're using fewer fossil fuels and so on. I mean, they've got in Scotland again. There is a hydrogen train that they're developing, which obviously is a much more environmentally friendly way of getting trains around, even more so than electric trains. But we haven't completed the electrification of our railways either. So that's going to take some money but it should be spent.
No, train travel through the southwest is slow, even when the line hasn't been washed away. But I mean, infrastructure is another valid argument as well, because obviously, as I said, that is our only line in and out of the southwest. There was talk about a secondary line being built over Dartmoor at one point, just in case the worst happens down in Dawlish yet again. But as it inevitably will again. But again, that was decided. Oh no, that's too expensive. But rail travel through the southwest. I mean, traveling from Penzance down my way up to London, half the time that it takes is just getting out of the southwest because the electrification isn't there, and it's hopeless. And of course, we've got virtually wall-to-wall conservative representation across the southwest. Where's the benefit to it? Where's the calls for this? Where's the demands for it? It's not there. We have some of the weakest MPs going. And I don't know. We haven't touched on the second jobs business yet. I don't know if we were going to touch on the reports that were coming out on that or not. But just as a Something that also crossed my mind, because it was a massive scandal not long ago, was MPs employing their partners. Well, this is still going on. I mean, Toby Perkins, the Labour MP, popped up on social media earlier on, pointing the finger and booing at the Conservatives over the press coverage that's been out today on who's the biggest second jobber in Parliament. And I pointed out to him at the time, well, hang on a minute, I've just had a look at the register of interest at you, and you're employing your partner. And I had a look on the, I thought, well, I'll look up the 6 Cornish Tory MPs a minute. Half of them employ their partner. I mean, it's the 600 and some odd MPs on that list. It takes some time to go through them all. But how many of them are employing spouses or other members of their family still? Even though it was made a massive to-do of previously. The one that really got me though was Ed Davey, because he had the neck to say, oh, I've got to make this £78,000 on the side because I've got a disabled child and I have to give it to them. Well, I've got a disabled child. I'd love to have £78,000 to
it's chicken feeds, Damo. Remember that?
So for change to them, isn't it? But, you know, I get 67.60 carers allowance for looking after my disabled wife, but despite having to look after my disabled daughter as well, I don't get any extra money to do that. And in fact, I'm only allowed to, you know, obviously the work I do with Socialist Telly and my other media work, people do give me donations for some of that as well. But if I should earn past £128 a week, obviously I'm nowhere near that. But if I did, I would lose that 67.60. And should I pass £143 per week, I would get booted. My family would be booted off the legacy benefit system straight onto universal credit, because they call it a change in circumstances. So I'm actually, not only can I, is it difficult enough as a carer to actually have a job as well and make a bit of money, but we're actually stopped from earning too much. We're actually capped. Where's the sense in this? It's ludicrous. And yet these MPs can earn thousands and thousands and thousands on the side with impunity when they're elected to do one job and one job only. And why is it so much of a hardship to stop MPs working second jobs? But Boris Johnson won't do it, and Keir Starmer was all for it, as we've spoken about already.
And the thing is, they're not doing these second jobs for the £9 an hour they think you and I can survive off. They're not doing on 0-hour contracts.
The job of an MP is the second job. That is the
sideline. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, and the job as the MP for a lot of them lines them up for an even more lucrative job when they're not an MP eventually. But so we've got 2 minutes left. Let's spend one, and we'll see if we can finish on time. Just quick thoughts on the fact that, according to the Jewish News, the Labour hierarchy is planning to try and get rid of 4 Labour MPs. I'll give you mine very quick. One is only 4. I very much doubt it. I think they'll be trying to get rid of as many left MPs as they can. And then we'll end up with more of the drones who perform and behave like the drones that are in there now on Keir Starmer's front bench. And the second thing is, 5 years we listened to right-wing Labour MPs going under the telly at every single opportunity. Wah! They're trying to deselect hard-working MPs. They're trying to get, how dare the right attack us when we are, we're serving our constituents and everything. And as soon as they get in, as with everything else, no compunction whatsoever about then turning around and doing 2 left-wing MPs exactly what they were whining about the whole time happening to right-wing MPs, which wasn't even happening. And, good performing MPs weren't being targeted. But, some of the people on the list of the ones they're trying to get rid of are some of the best MPs we've got in Parliament at the minute. And I've used up 1 minute, so let's use the last one and 30 seconds each. What do you reckon?
I think Labour's focus should be on hanging on to seats, not giving them away. We've lost enough. And their choices and decisions that they made in places such as Hartlepool don't exactly show them that they've got a good track record. They need to start shoring up seats and stop attacking Labour MPs, please.
It's ridiculous. It's just the continuation of the factional war. We always knew the left MPs were going to be targeted when it came up to reselections or working out who's going to stand for the next Parliament. Ian Byrne was one of the people that was named on there. We know that his CLP has got it in for him. This is the man that's driven the Right to Food campaign. This is something that he has championed ever since he came in. This is something that is now happening across the country. He is one of the most hard-working, brilliant Labour MPs I've ever seen in my experience. And he absolutely doesn't deserve to be treated like this. If people want a proper, decent Labour MP, he's a prime example of it. And so is Zara Sultana, who I'll also name. And I think she would be a fantastic future leader.
Also, there are 2 BAME women in that list. Why is that?
Mm-hmm. Well, and we've seen Diane Abbott having to deny today that she's retiring because they're trying to manoeuvre her out as well. Yeah, they might lip service about equality within the Labour Party at the minute, but the anti-black and anti-Muslim racism in the party is I can't say it's shocking because it's not a surprise at all, but it is an absolute disgrace. On that sad note, we're gonna end it for tonight. Sorry we couldn't bring you anything more cheerful. But if you can steel yourself to do it,
on the plus side, the media are hating Johnson at the moment, so there's a bit of good news.
Yeah, but well, it is. But then when you look at what's waiting to take over, if he plummets within this party and on the other side,
and they'll turn on
within this party and on the other side of the house, it's cold comfort really. So, okay, folks, we'll end it there before we go too much over time and let you get on with the rest of your evening. Have an excellent week. Do keep your eye on the Socialist Telly feed to see what's coming through, and do your subscribe bits, etc. And we'll see you again this time next week, if not before. Take care.
See you.
Cheers, folks.